It is the leader of the deadly trump card quartet, with his emblem being that of the diamond. It is TKG00 GanKing, coming with the kit of First Aid, Double Countdown, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Endurance, which fills Metaforce gauge upon being attacked by incoming enemies. Now, naturally, in earlier games, we have seen GanKing in the past, so him having a model is definitely nothing new, but this is his official grand debut into Medarot S as a pullable gacha model, and with him sporting his signature move, Countdown. First Aid is a setup-based skill and definitely going to be a first for male types, as simply put, it will put a heal plant on the field, and upon completing a heat phase of the end of your turn, a single broken part of the ally will be restored back at 10% HP, which makes it very, very useful for passive healing in order to help keep parts in play, even if they do come at very little HP. Countdown is a brand new skill being debuted in the game with its user GanKing, but simply put, when attacking the target, it will set a timer at 3, excluding the first hit, which sets the timer. With every hit in consecutive of Countdown, it will knock the timer down 1 tick. When the timer reaches 0, it does not matter how healthy the target is or how close to dying the target is. When that timer hits 0, it is good night. No saving, no healing, no defense, instantaneous death with Countdown, which makes it a very, very dangerous ailment skill to make use of on the field if used correctly. However, part of that also does lie in the fact of my sentence. It is an ailment, meaning that it can be negated or cleansed with stat cleanse, which puts it at a huge, I'd say, balance in this case, where it can be a very dangerous if used in the right hands, but in the wrong hands, it's more or less kind of useless. Now, holding true to what basically made him iconic ever since Medarot 3, he is sporting a very massively high HP pool on everything but his head, which makes it his singular Achilles heel. His head, of course, packing just barely 2000 HP makes it very, very squishy. Not necessarily as squishy as it was in earlier games where he only sported 10 HP, or even 100 in later titles, but still enough that a very well-timed AoE skill can very easily take him out. Arms packing almost 4600 each, and his legs at almost 4800 definitely do make up for that with the HP pool, meaning he can definitely take a hit and keep on kicking as long as they are not AoEs. On his leg skills, I was honestly kind of impressed because I was expecting him to be very high armor like he was kitted to be, but compensating it with lower mobility. But I was proven wrong. With the mobility of 817, he definitely will be keeping up with a lot of the faster bops very easily, especially given that biped legs do give him an advantage across most terrains moderately well across the board with good balance. Even with his other stats, 753 evade, 760 shoot resist, and 1150 melee resist, I'd say moderately well balanced as far as a biped legs like his could be concerned. And with the heavy limit of 2, even if you decide to use him as mixed parts, the legs are honestly pretty solid enough that you could use them moderately well without having to rely on a Metaforce reliant nuker in this case. Now, GanKing is also capable of a meta change form, where he trades his entirely offense and ailment-based kit out for a completely and purely support-based one, with a kit of Perfect Guard, Charge Trap, Charge Plant, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Super Armor, which renders the user immune to paralyze ailments, such as freeze, free shot, shock, and so on, a certain number of times. Now, naturally, because he is in a single form where all of his HP is condensed into one, there is not really a lot that is condensed in this case aside from his kit. Aside from, of course, all the way, of course, from say his HP and capping out his stats. Perfect Guard, we've seen it before, we've seen it again, and it's honestly wonderful for what it offers as a defense skill, but simply put, when on the line, it will allow GanKing to intercept any and all incoming blows and nullify them at 0 damage. And as well, this was brought to my attention, because Perfect Guard is being introduced in a beta change based form and not as a standalone part, this does also mean GanKing is immune, possibly and potentially, to anyone that is using Destroy, which will make him a very big pain in the neck on the field if he is on the enemy side, in order to help if you don't want him getting in your way. However, he is of course also susceptible to as one example, say Slip, which will still cancel Perfect Guard as one of the other alternatives, or if you hit him with, say, Deathlock or No Defend or Defense Seal, you should be able to cancel this all the same. Charge Trap is a passive aggression-based plant that is put on the field that, simply put, when the opponent goes to charge Metaphors, which, such as, say, if a shield is in their way guarding them, this will damage them over time as they charge Metaphors and even potentially break parts over it. Charge Plant is more or less the exact opposite of such, whereas it will put a plant on your side, and every time you charge Metaphors, you will gain a small amount extra upon completing that turn. Float Legs honestly do give GanKing's meta change form a very solid mobility across all terrains, which him as a Metaforce sustainer and perfect defender honestly do round him out very well. As a pure set score, I honestly do have to rate him a very solid 7.5 out of 10, given that even though Countdown is very, very dangerous in the right hands, as I said previously, it is still considered an ailment, which means it can provide a very big weakness and drawback to GanKing if you choose to use him as a pure set. However, given the fact that his kit does kind of round him out very nicely with endurance, meaning that as he takes hit, it will fill his own Metaforce gauge, he can honestly kind of tie in and swap in to use Perfect Guard whenever he gets the chance. In addition, one of the other major weaknesses of GanKing to kind of help round him out in this case, despite him having infinite Perfect Guard, it's not necessarily infinite, in the sense that all three of his change forms, all three of his drives rather, require him a certain amount of CG to use. But the Super Armor ability is honestly a nice touch on that too, to help kind of curb extra ailments from getting in his way. As mixed parts, I would have to rate him actually equally at a 7.5 out of 10. Primarily given the fact that even if as a pure set, as mixed parts, you are missing out on Perfect Guard, Countdown, First Aid, and his Biped Legs are honestly very, very handy skills all the same. If you could maybe put some HP chips and an HP Metarauder on the head, First Aid can be used very easily pretty much anywhere, as long as you can account for being just a little bit careful with it in that respect. Whereas both his arms and his legs, if you split them up, such as say use both arms on both of your attackers, you honestly could knock that timer down on Countdown very easily, without having to spend too many turns spamming it over and over.